What up, Hyperchange? Welcome to another episode. Today we have a really exciting interview with George, the CEO of Rally, a new startup that is securitizing collectibles and sort of disrupting this entire collectible and art marketplace that I've been really interested in and focused on. I think there's so much action going on here. They just announced a new funding round as well, expanding into a bunch of new categories. So really excited to learn more about the company. George, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Rally was started about 5 years ago. And for those who don't know about the product or what you do, can you just break it down a little bit for us?
Sure. I mean, we securitize rare and collectible items across a number of different categories, and we turn those items into SEC registered securities, and then we offer those on a fractional basis to retail investors, and retail investors can participate in offerings for those items and then trade the shares of those items on our secondary market.
Really cool. And I know the company started with classic cars, I believe, which traditionally was such an asset where it seems like, the pain point was really high. Like everybody loves collectible cars. Like it's this thing in pop culture we all want to be a part of, but there's no way to access it. I'm not going to pay $100,000 for a car and then like keep it in some garage somewhere. Like that's ridiculous. So can you talk a little bit about why you started with cars and how you've sort of methodically expanded and sort of the thought process behind expanding to new categories?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you just nailed it. I mean, the founders of the company, Chris Bruno, one of the founders, talks all of the time about how the only difference between Chris in 2016 and Jerry Seinfeld in 2016 was the fact that Jerry Seinfeld had $25 million to drop on 5 or 6 Porsches in the classic car auction in Pebble Beach or wherever, right? And so it was absolutely that thesis, right? That people love these items, but the number of people, to your point, that can plunk down $100,000 or $200,000 or even less than that in some cases, is very small. And so that was the genesis of the idea. And I think all along, the thought process was that cars are not the only high value collectible item, and that this could expand. And so, the expansion into new asset classes was really inevitable. And after sort of perfecting the model over the course of a year or year and a half or so, the team expanded into these other asset classes, and sure enough, we're at a point now in popular culture where collectibles are ascendant, and the vision that Rob and Chris and Max had is coming true.
Awesome. And could you walk us through a little bit, just an example? Let's use a classic car. How does it actually work? Like, does Rally acquire that car, and what sort of process do you do to, legally securitize it and then be able to offer that for such a small amount to people through an app?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of ways that we acquire the assets, and without getting into all of that detail, in essence, the way it works is we acquire or we get an asset. Let's take a car as an example. Um, Either we purchase it or we get it on consignment, and then we take that item and we register that item as a security, and there's an SEC regulation called Regulation A and Regulation A plus that allows us to securitize these items and then offer them to non-accredited investors. And so the item is registered as a security, just as you'd register securities for a company or any other securitized item. And then the shares are offered in an initial offering where an initial group of investors buys into that offering. And then once they buy into that offering, they own a share or a number of shares, and then can buy and sell and trade those shares. So it's really a process that's very similar to creating a security that's based around a company. Largely, it's identical. It's a very familiar metaphor.
And then when investor buys into these securities, what type of liquidity options do they have? And sort of how does that work? Like, does it trade every day like a stock, or how does that sort of unfold if I want to cash out eventually?
Yeah, currently it doesn't trade every day. Currently we trade items periodically, 30, 60, 90 days. What we're in the middle of working on now, and what we will bring to the market over the course of the next, couple of months, is a continuous 5 days a week, very similar to market hours, trading system where all of our assets will trade. But basically, the liquidity is trading in these, we call them trading windows. And then on a number of occasions, what happens is someone will come to us and offer to buy the entire item, almost, always at a premium, obviously. And what we do is we put that offer to vote to the shareholders of the item. So the shareholders vote yes or no. There's been cases where they voted to accept these offers. There's been cases where they've rejected them, but we basically listen to the shareholders in that case. And in the case of a buyout, we return the cash along with the cash premium to all the investors in the item.
Really cool. And I'm curious, like, how big is this market? Because up until this point, like, it's sort of been really, like, it's already a big market, collectible cars and all this collectible stuff, but it hasn't been securitized. And so you have to think that securitizing these assets will unlock like a tidal wave of liquidity. If more people can buy it, supply and demand, this market will grow. And I think just in general, the people's willingness to buy collectible cars and assets like that increases if there are more marketplaces to provide liquidity. So it's this kind of cool self-fulfilling prophecy and flywheel. As more, I see all like Rally is one of a few players, like StockX is doing it for sneakers. And so there's this whole tidal wave of liquidity coming to all these assets. And I'm curious, like, do you have any ideas? I know the sneaker resale market is like a few billions of dollars. Do you have any size on like the collectible, maybe just cars or the collectible overall market?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly hard to say what fractionalization of it on its own is, but I can tell you that there's a couple of different data points that you can use to triangulate this, right? So on one hand, the amount of wealth in collectibles in just high net worth individuals' hands in the country is $1.2 trillion, according to a couple of annual surveys that are done by Deloitte and Credit Suisse, right? So that's just assets in the hands of high net worth. So you can do the math on what's in the rest of the country's hands, right? High net worth is defined as people with $50 million of net worth or above, right? So small number of people, right? Um, about 200 and about 250 billion dollars of collectible assets change hands in a given year in places where we can easily track them. So auctions, both online, auction houses, private sales, etc. That is almost undoubtedly undercounted by some factor. You can decide what factor that is, right? So the amount of sales that we know exist in a given year, is $250 billion. We know there's $1 trillion plus in the hands of high net worth individuals, private individuals. And then the amount of assets in the hands of institutions or in the hands of brands is, incalculable. And so there's a lot of supply out there. I think what fractionalization will do, and frankly, what Rally's thesis is, right? Rally's thesis is make the world a tradable asset, right? So I think what fractionalization will do is, on one side, it will allow asset holders to unlock the liquidity in their assets and make a choice while doing it, right? So if you think about what an asset holder does today, an asset holder has to make a choice between the liquidity or the item, right? And fractionalizing the item or fractionalizing a part of the item can, in some cases, let them hold on to the asset and fractionalize a portion and get that liquidity, right? So there's another way for an asset holder to get liquidity, right? And then on the other side, to your point, the number of people that can participate in a high value asset is very, very small, right? And the number of people that want to participate and feel passionate about participating is a lot bigger than the people that can write the check for the whole item, right? So I think you're right. I mean, you basically nailed the thesis of the company, right? Unlock the liquidity in the asset, provide access to people who wouldn't have that access, and I think you're right. That's going to grow the that's going to grow the market.
And does that 1.2 trillion number include art like paintings? Because I know that's a big, or is it not including
It's
that?
everything. It's everything. It's art. It's paintings. It's sports collectibles. It's rare books. It's rare musical instruments. It's, you name it. If you think of it as collectible or rare, it's rare watches and jewelry and you name it.
Yeah.
all those categories for
And I
sure.
think it's interesting that you lump them in together because as kind of a foregone conclusion, because that's I feel like a thesis I have that most people don't, which is that collectibles are art, and I feel like that world's fusing so much. But previously, it's only been like paintings are kind of put on this pedestal of art and sculptures, where like collectibles and classic cars and sneakers like aren't really art. Like I love sneakers. I have a bunch of Nike SBs in my closet that I'm saving. I think those are like art, but they're not really appreciated as art yet. But that's almost like why I want to buy them now. So I'm curious of like your kind of opinion on like how society and the zeitgeist is starting to view these assets, different things beyond paintings as art.
Right. Well, you're going to get me in trouble with my recent art school graduate daughter, I guess. But art. Hopefully, she doesn't watch this. Art. Look, I guess art's in the eye of the beholder, right? Like I agree with you, right? I think a Marvel comic book is as much art as a Picasso is, right? And um, I think a one of a kind baseball card, or for that matter, a one of a kind or one of one historical artifact is as much art as something that we would traditionally consider art. And I think it's what you value, right? And so I think for one person that's sneakers, for another person that's rare books, for another person that's coins, right? And so I think it's less about, for me anyway, trying to pigeonhole it in some category. Is it art or is it not? Or are we viewing it as art or not viewing it as art? And more say, is it something that I see as valuable and something that I'm passionate about? And I think that's really the intersection, right? If it's a high value item, it's something that's seen and can be sort of viewed, even if it's not something you're into yourself, as an item with value, and it's something you're passionate about. It's like those intersections are the things that are the things that belong on Rally.
Interesting. And I'm so curious to hear more about the your new categories you're expanding to, because my personal collecting portfolio is all about like the Boring Company Flamethrowers, which are technically not allowed to resell. So I don't know if that's a good one for your platform, but like Tesla Tequila, the Tesla short shorts, like I love those products. And I think they would be like home runs. I think they're going to be amazing collectibles down the road because like they're tied to Elon Musk's legacy. Oh, another one is the original Tesla Roadster. This is like the first time I heard about Rally. I was like, oh my God, there's like a 1,500 of these Roadsters. It's like a bet on Tesla as an iconic brand blowing up, the first mass market electric car. And you can still, and they're still in this trough of like, oh, it's a used sports car from 10 years ago. So it's less than it retailed for, even though people aren't realizing it's a collectible car. So you can get it for like 100 G's when it's worth millions in the future. I'm getting carried away, but I like this idea of Elon Musk's kind of like weird merch like flamethrowers or Tesla Tequila. So I'm curious if you'll ever have products like that on the platform, but otherwise, just in general, like what kind of categories you're expanding to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the original Tesla Roadster is like it's like right in our sweet spot, right? Like to your point, um, to me, what makes an item or a category a good item or category for Rally is the story and the content behind it. So an example, right, is we had and have um, the joystick from Buzz Aldrin's seat position in the Apollo 11 command module. So, you could press pause right there, and just saying that makes it cool enough, right? That's cool enough. But the story of how that ended up in our hands is even cooler than the item itself, right? And so I'll tell the story real quickly if you want to hear it. It's
Yeah.
basically, as the legend goes, these joysticks were mounted and presented to Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins, and they, in sort of a statement about the fact that they felt like, they were doing their duty for the country, they kind of turned them down, said they didn't need the memento of the of the of the flight, right? So whether this part is true or not, I don't know, but it's the legend. In any case, it wasn't in Buzz Aldrin's hands ever, and it was found in a drawer by a NASA engineer who was cleaning out his desk in the 80s. He was retiring, who I guess apparently worked on the Apollo program. and you know, lo and behold, through auction, makes its way out into the public, and and makes its way to us, right? So, like, that's a story. How much of it is apocryphal or not, I guess we'll never know. But that's a story you can't make up, right? And that's just a cool story, right? And I think your example of the original Tesla Roadster is a cool story in and of itself, right? It captures this time. I don't know if you remember the first time you saw a Tesla Roadster in the wild, right? But you probably remember that moment. That was a cool moment, and there was a story being told there. We didn't know where the story was going to end, right? But in whatever it was, 2006, 2007, right? That story was sort of just being written. So it's certainly something where you look back on that story and say it's not only is this important because it's an important piece of technology and it was a harbinger of what was to come, but there's an interesting just story about how it came to be behind it, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the kind of thing, and I think um, in categories that we want to expand to, it's the same thing, right? It starts with the story, right? So, in our latest press release, we talk about things like art, we talk about things like NFTs, we talk about things like real estate, right? And whenever we bring up real estate, people say, well, what does that really mean? And, the way I view Rally vis-a-vis that category is, we never want to be the place where you're just a real estate speculator and you're investing in some nondescript block of apartments, in Park Slope in Brooklyn. No disrespect to Park Slope, right? Right. But we're the kind of place where the real estate we're talking about is, for example, Tolkien. Why? And these are all made up examples. But why couldn't a fan of Tolkien invest in Tolkien's house that he wrote The Hobbit in, right? Or why couldn't a music fan, a jazz fan, invest in John Coltrane's house in Philadelphia where he wrote Giant Steps, right? Or someone who's a fan of counterculture, invest in a portion of the Chelsea Hotel where that's be available, right? So it's those kinds of things, right? All of those things have stories and provenance and richness and passion behind them. It's those kind of assets that we'll bring to the platform, regardless of the category that we would the category. And if the owners of the Chelsea Hotel are listening to this, they can send an email to george@rallyroad.com and we'll talk.
Another one is like the Space Needle, because I'm from Seattle, so I'm thinking like that's a kind of funny, iconic piece of real estate. And you mentioned NFTs. I'm so curious what your take is on NFTs. I actually created an NFT of my first ever YouTube video and auctioned that off a few months ago to kind of like sell my first digital collectible. So I'm so fascinated by this space and just love crypto. And I'm curious like how Rally is an IRL collectible company. I guess it's really easy to just, I'm thinking like Joy World, who's this really cool NFT artist, has like these incredible 3D like VR works that go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that starts to get to the threshold of like a classic car where it's too hard for one person to buy. And then this is even cooler than a classic car. Maybe it's kind of the same, but like there's a VR world where I can monetize, or like there's some concert and then I can monetize this VR work, this 3D work. Like all of a sudden the security holders of that, token or whatever could get like a dividend based on the usefulness of these assets. So I don't know. I'm just kind of curious what Rally's take is on this whole NFT space.
Yeah, the way we view the space is it's an asset class, just like any other asset class, right? And so again, you just said it, right? Some of these NFTs are getting to the point again, like any collectible asset, they are now behaving like any collectible asset, right? Where at the high end, the one of one examples and the most brilliant examples of what a great NFT is, right? They're outside the realm of the normal person, right? So again, it's exactly those kind of assets that Rally was built for, and we're not viewing NFTs any differently than that. That's the way we're going to think about bringing NFTs, right? What are the best? What are the one of ones, and what are the ones where we can bring access to an asset, in this case an NFT, that our investors otherwise would never be able to touch, and it has a wide sort of set of passionate people that that are fans of it. So for sure, I mean, we're thinking of it again, like that's what we think the beauty of the model is. We're thinking of it as, it's an asset, not just an asset class. It's an asset class.
Really cool. And to play devil's advocate a little about this whole collectible space, where does this all go? Like, what's the philosophy of this asset that as time goes on always increases in value? Like, watches, art. collectibles, they'll always show you this chart of like it's an uncorrelated asset compounding at 25%, in perpetuity forever, always outpacing the S&P. But it's like, where does this all go? Does it just steadily, like, all old assets continue going up at this great rate and like, or is there some sort of peak psychology where like the zeitgeist relevance of this collectible watches as a whole goes down, and that sort of breaks the norm of that industry? Like, I wonder how you think through about it, because we're sort of in this weird territory of like, we think it has value, but it's kind of all made up. It's just if it's a classic car, it's just a piece of metal that in theory is getting less valuable by the day because it's older and less useful. So how do you make,
Yeah, I mean, I listen. It's interesting. If I had a dime for every time someone asked me, "Is this a bubble? Are we in a bubble?" You know, who who knows? I mean, you think too much of me if you think I can predict that. If I could, I'd be I'd be in Vegas or something. We wouldn't be having this conversation. But look, the way I view collectibles is, and I think the beauty of collectibles is they are more concrete than people give them credit for. Right? If you think about a company is not an immutable object when we think about it as an investment, right? Companies can change, competitive sets can change, management teams can change, technology can come along. Like all we need to do is think about BlackBerry, right? Like BlackBerry ruled the world right up until the point where it didn't, and then it was largely irrelevant, right? And so those things can change. The nature of most of these collectibles, and even a classic car, the classic car is kept in the right condition. Certainly, if you're driving your 64 Mustang, that's a different story, right? But, when you think about a baseball card, or you think about a rare book or a rare document, right? Stored correctly, treated in the right way. The nature of those things is largely immutable. A Honus Wagner baseball card is going to be the same card today as it was yesterday and as it will be tomorrow. Now, we may disagree on what the value of that card is at any given point in time, but we know what that card is. We know what the nature of that card is, and it's immutable, and it will never change, right? Whereas companies, which are just as make believe as any other asset, right? We agree that a company's valuable because we all just at some point in time agree on it, right? Is in a lot of ways, a lot less constant and enduring potentially as the physical nature of these assets. So, I think that's what collectibles have going for them. Will they go up and down in value? Are we in a peak now, and will there be a trough? Sure, maybe. I think one of the things that I loved about Rally when I was deciding whether to join the company or not was the very nature of the multi-category approach, right? We're not a baseball card destination. We're not an art destination. We're not a car destination, right? We view ourselves as, again, right, if it's rare, if it has value, if people have passion around it, right? We're a platform where you can, virtually anything that fits that bill can and should be on Rally. So I think, the nature of the fact that there will be multiple subcategories under the general heading of rare or collectible kind of insulates us to a certain extent, around the sort of peaks and troughs that any one kind of asset can go through.
Awesome. This has been such an awesome conversation. I've loved learning about it. And I'm curious, before I let you go, how do you see Rally evolving? You just joined the team not too long ago. Maybe you could tell us a little about why you joined and why you're excited, and sort of how you see everything evolving over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I joined largely because I wanted to do something where I had more of a direct impact. I joined a company from the Walt Disney uh, the Walt Disney Company most recently before Rally. Loved Disney and loved obviously Disney's the great arguably the greatest company in the history of the entertainment industry, and actually probably not arguably. Um, but I wanted to do something where my direct impact on a day-to-day basis was more evident, and I wanted to get a little bit smaller. Um, and so that was sort of the thesis for leaving Disney. And the thesis for joining Rally was I really kind of passionately believe in this idea of, why should the rich guys and gals have all the fun, right? And this idea of being able to like get the access to these items into the hands of the normal everyday person, I think is a worthwhile, it's a really sort of worthwhile mission. And I think when you think about it, um, across all of these categories and the trillions of dollars in these assets, I think it's an important, big problem to solve. So that's why I joined. And I would say, look, we're going to continue to do the things that have gotten us here, right? We're going to continue to try to find the coolest assets and add them, and the coolest asset categories and add those. Um, and we're really going to ramp up the evolution of our product now. We just closed a $30 million funding round, led by Excel. Ryan Sweeney's the partner there. They're a great partner. They're going to be a great partner, and we're going to use that money to really just sort of amp the product experience up and make it better and better, make trading better and better, and just bring more liquidity and more assets to the platform. And we think, if we stay focused on that as the main mission, we're going to be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think I'm such a big fan and I can't wait to see this grow. Even in the past few years since I've started following Rally, just to see you go from cars to all this and increasing your trading, it's been really, really awesome. And as someone who bought sneakers on like forums online and got scammed so many times because they weren't legit, and has like been navigating this collectible world pre this mass securitization, I really appreciate the platform you're building and think it's going to make, like you said, the little guys who are collectors like be able to play in this market and have so much fun. And I think that's really awesome. So I can't wait to see how it evolves. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, of course. You too. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Peace.